Why didn't you put the bunny back in the box? Oh, and spoilers. Welcome to the channel, I'm Hayes, I talk movies all day, so subscribe right now if you want to be entertained. And today, I want to talk about Con Air, the 1997 action-packed movie about a bunch of criminals doing criminal things, but one of the criminals is better than the other criminals because it's Nicolas Cage. Now how this works is I'm going to go through the movie, point out all the reasons I can find as to why it's trash, and then at the end, drop a few final thoughts. So the movie starts off with a voice telling us that the Army Rangers have a proud history and how we sorry to see these guys go because they're a credit to that history. But if they were so good at their jobs, why not offer them a position to stay? There's a whole gang of current and/or new recruits right there. Somebody's gonna need to guide them. And how are you gonna talk about how they're such a credit to their proud history, but apart from Cameron Poe, none of them get their faces on camera? Furthermore, if they're such a credit, how come all their salutes are different? This guy looks like he's just trying to scratch his eyebrow, and this guy looks like the director told him, dude, cover your face. So, is there a stationary Alabama? Anyway, does Trisha Poe work at the bar? I mean, how would Cameron know where to go to surprise her? Did he go home, she weren't there and thought, she must be at the bar again? Because right now, I'm thinking she's either an alcoholic or she needs to get back to work before she gets fired. This guy says he'd take a beating half his life to get a piece of that woman. Thing is, if you took a beating half your life and all you got was a piece of a woman, that's really not a good deal. At all. Well, maybe it depends on which piece. Anyway, so Trisha Poe was pregnant before Cameron got back from the Rangers. I mean, they kinda make it seem like they ain't seen each other for a good long while and she don't look that far along, so... Cameron talks to the unborn baby and says, "You're gonna be Miss Alabama? Well, that makes your daddy very proud." And I don't know, it just seems a bit odd to be already imagining your unborn daughter in a bikini on stage while a bunch of horny men ogle at her and the host announces the wrong winner and oh wait a minute, they did say it was Alabama, so yeah, never mind. This guy was rude and disrespectful to Trisha Poe and Cameron didn't hit him. Man, if this was a Will Smith movie. Anyway, Cameron didn't want to plead guilty, but his lawyer told him that if he didn't, he'll get 10 years. But if he does plead guilty, he'll get 4 years and serve maybe only 1. Cameron does plead guilty and got a minimum of 7 years. First of all, that's a shit lawyer. And B, I ain't no legal expert or nothing, but I've seen enough courtroom dramas to know that this would have been a self-defense case and not a manslaughter case. They provoked him, he walked away, they followed him, they attacked, they even brought a weapon. Cameron defended himself. Furthermore, as far as the whole military skills thing goes, they knew he was military. He's still wearing his uniform, they even blame him for losing Vietnam, they ripped his badge off, and by the way, was that badge velcroed on? Because there's no way it should have come off that easily. Anyway, the point is, they picked a fight with a guy who they know is trained to kill. It's an open shut case. This movie should have been like 6 minutes, max. Also, on the note of this guy being a crap lawyer, he told Cameron to plead guilty, enter a plea bargain and get 4 years, which means the lawyer should have already agreed with the prosecutor to those terms. The fact that Cameron pleaded guilty and still got 7 years means the lawyer never made that arrangement before telling Cameron to plead guilty. So the way I see it, we need a Con Air 2 where Cameron comes back to kick the lawyer's ass for being terrible at his job and costing him 7 years of his life. There's a scene where Cameron is writing pen pal letters to his wife and child. It's sweet, but they've already said they're from Alabama, so come on. So somebody thought it was a good idea to put the worst of the worst prisoners all together on one plane and send them to a new prison in Alabama because for some reason the film producers hate Alabama. But what was the point of Cameron being on that flight? I mean, yeah, I know they were going to his hometown anyway, but since when were prisons in the habit of giving civilians a lift? Cameron was a free man, they should have made him find his own way home from the original prison. This movie could have been like 12 minutes, max. The first time we see Vince Larkin, he's got a pair of "What are those?" No way is this guy getting taken seriously. When they introduce Duncan Malloy, he parks his car in the disabled bay. I guess it's supposed to make him look like an arsehole. However, the parking spot is by the runway, which means that area is not open to the general public. Only staff park there. And since they've already started work, the bay was empty and nobody complains that somebody might be using it later, I'm gonna guess that this airport doesn't actually employ disabled people, so who's the real arsehole here? When they introduced Nathan Diamond Dog Jones, they say he blew up a National Rifle Association meeting because they represent the basest negativity of the white race. 25 years later, I think there's a lot of people who would agree with him. This guard hit the inmates once and hurt himself. I'm pretty sure nobody fears his treatment at this point. So, not only did someone think it was a good idea to put the worst of the worst criminals on one flight together, they never thought to run them through metal detectors and x-rays before going aboard. Larkin said they're going to treat that plane like a prison. You'd think they'd know prisoners hide things inside their bodies all the time. Also, why are their hands cuffed in front of them? These are the worst of the worst. Their hands should be cuffed behind them or to the side, and their ankles should be cuffed too. This whole operation is Larkin's barbecue, and it tastes like he's lackadaisically inept in the conduct of his obligations. Huh? How's that for being garrulous? So was that string just in his mouth? Just there, going all the way down his throat and ties to a bag, and all this time Pinball is just walking and talking regular? I ain't no scientifical optometrist or whatever, but does that seem right to you? Dude should have been coughing and struggling all over the place. Nah, that string was all the way swallowed. He should have had to poop that one out. So the lever to open the cages where the worst of the worst of the worst are being held was placed where the worst of the worst are. Who thought that was a good idea? Also, did they just have a guy shout Allahu Akbar before hijacking an airplane mid-flight? Actually, it's a pretty accurate prediction of the future. Okay, so this top security plane got hijacked. Cyrus and Diamond knew they would be cuffed in cages. Pinball knew he'd be put in Gen Pop. They also knew where the levers to open the cages were. This is an inside job. Somebody's working both sides of the fence here. The undercover DEA guy decides to put his gun on Pinball and take him hostage. Obviously, this guy has never seen one of his specials.
What we understood was simple. Terrorists don't take black hostages.
Pinball asked Cyrus if he meant it when he called him a dirty nigger crackhead. The thing is, Cyrus actually called him a 2-bit Negro crackhead, which is just a little bit less racist. Hold up, so the guards at Cyrus's prison only decided to check his cell long after he already boarded the plane? Yo, who's running this operation? I mean, I know it's Larkin, but come on. We need a Con Air 2 where Larkin gets fired and sent to prison for being criminally incompetent, and then ends up on a plane with the worst of the worst that gets hijacked by a kid playing Flight Simulator. Also, how did Cyrus manage to build a partition wall in his cell to hide plans to hijack the plane? Inside job. Also, Cyrus built the wall, made it look exactly like the other prison walls, but left wall dust on the floor and a small chip in one of the bricks? Are you dumb? Anyway, you see the way they strapped up Garland Green? That's the same way they should have strapped up everyone on that plane. Also, they say Garland Green butchered 30-something people up and down the eastern seaboard. They don't say why, but I'm gonna guess that all Garland really wanted was an apology, and he would have left them alone.
Oh God, stay here. Don't touch anything.
Dude, you had one job. One job! Well, 2, technically, but still, one job! Because the plan went south, Cyrus told the pilot to take off ahead of schedule, which meant Pinball was not on board. But why would Pinball still try to get on? He's pretty much home free at this point. All he gotta do is casually walk off the premises while everyone is focused on the plane. Are you dumb? The argument between Larkin and Malloy is interesting, because it's true that DEA guy was told not to bring a gun on the plane and Malloy helped him sneak one on board anyway. It's true that DEA guy acted like a buffoon and got himself killed. But it's also true that Larkin's whole operation is abysmally incompetent. The most basic checks were not done, and nobody's even suggesting the most obvious glaring thing, that it's an inside job. Like, why is no one concerned about how Cyrus got a hold of aeroplane plans? So what you have here is 2 men finger pointing and neither taking any accountability for their own stupidity. Anyway, Larkin said contingency plans for something like this don't exist. Why? Did they really think their idea was that solid? But anyway, it's not true. There are contingency plans, and the contingency plan would be to shoot down the plane. And the fact that Malloy requested armed helicopters in the very next scene really shows that he should be running this thing. And speaking of unfit leaders, why is Cyrus telling Cameron what the plan is? Things like that should be on a need to know. and Cameron don't need to know. Cameron then asks Diamond what a black militant is doing taking orders from a white guy on a power trip, and quite frankly, we're all wondering that too. Anyway, Diamond says it's a means to an end, and when he gets to where he's going, the day of the dog begins, suggesting that he's got a really big plan of his own. So why is everyone so quick to tell Cameron their plans? Ain't none of them seen a James Bond movie? Malloy brings an attack helicopter to shoot down the plane. Larkin is against the idea because he believes that Cameron is their ally on board. He's right, but even still, what exactly is Larkin expecting one person to do against a whole plane full of armed and dangerous criminals? I mean, sure, we know how it all turns out in the end. I'm just saying, if that's your plan, it really doesn't help to disprove Malloy's claim about Larkin's incompetence.
Yeah.
Cyrus wants you to check out the landing gear.
First of all, Cyrus didn't ask Cameron to check out the landing gear, so liar, liar, pants on fire. And B, of all the people Diamond could have got to go with him, he gets the one guy asking way too many unnecessary questions, and not once thought, this is a real good opportunity to put a bullet in the back of his head and chuck him out the plane along with Pinball. Instead, he turns his back on him long enough for Cameron to write out a whole wanted ad on Pinball. Now I know Pinball's body was frozen stiff, but would it really stay intact when falling from that height?
He's a fount of misplaced rage. Mother held him too much or not enough. Happiness for that gentleman hurts.
Garland Green could probably start a YouTube channel. So Larkin had Trisha and Casey Poe flown out to speak to him at the US Marshal's office to try and figure out why Cameron didn't get off the plane. Dude, that could have been a phone call. So Malloy left his car unattended with the roof down and the keys in the ignition. Are you dumb? Also, I get they're trying to show Larkin drives a beat up old banger, but there is no good reason for anyone to let their car get that dirty. Also, who moved the cars? Earlier there were some plants, a disabled parking sign, a blue line on the ground, so somebody just moved both cars because... why? Maybe Malloy's car was moved because it shouldn't have been in the disabled bay, or why was Larkin's car moved? Was it also in a disabled bay? If so, kind of further proves that this place doesn't actually employ disabled people. Anyway, Larkin stole a car, drove it at high speeds in the center of the road while operating a mobile phone. So these guys are fighting in the belly of the plane, making all kinds of ruckus, and nobody thought they should go down and check on them? Really? This is the pipe that broke out. Notice how low down it is. This is the pipe that killed Billy. All of a sudden it's higher up, much longer, and stopped hissing. Now if it's supposed to be a different pipe, then what was the point of showing the first one? And what's up with Billy Bedlam's teeth constantly changing color?
And saying he was working 50 hours a week in some office for 50 years, at the end of which they tell you to piss off.
There's a quote I saw in a meme that said something like, adulthood is realizing you understand the villain. Yeah, I think I agree with that. You know, back in 1997, some things they got right. When landing the plane, Swamp Thing turned the craft towards a giant propane tank and managed to brake before hitting it. Cool, but couldn't he just use the brakes anyway without turning it towards a giant propane tank? Are you dumb? Cameron makes a good point about why they shouldn't kill the cops just yet, but surely by now the fact that he's constantly inserting himself into Cyrus's operation is way more than grounds enough to just pop a cap in his ass and be done with it. This movie could have been like an hour and 10 minutes, max. So, within walking distance of an airfield where a plane full of convicts crash landed and a man was murdered is a little girl sitting alone in an empty swimming pool. You might be thinking, where are her parents? I have a theory. Based entirely on the fact that she got on so well with Garland Green, my theory is her dad is the dead body that Larkin found, and that sweet little girl is the one who killed him. Cameron and Larkin have a heart-to-heart, but don't they teach you in cop school to make sure the area is secure before giving out sensitive information? Diamond Dog whipping the guys pulling the aeroplane out of the sand. Why do I get the feeling this is the only reason Ving Rhames took the role? Was Cameron getting breakfast when he should have been looking for fuel and medicine for Baby O? I mean, I understand, I'd probably do the same thing, just, you know. Anyway, when they shoot a rope tied to the plane, it hooks onto Malloy's car, which then gets dragged past Malloy. But after flying in a straight line, when the dragged car crashes into the tower, causing the car to fall off, the car lands directly in front of Malloy. The science ain't sciencing. Garland Green says, define irony, a bunch of idiots dancing on a plane to a song made famous by a band that died in a plane crash. The band that he's referring to is called Lynyrd Skynyrd, and the plane that they crashed in was called a convict, just one letter over from being his movie title. Baby O tries to take credit for everything Cameron did to try to save them, So my question is, how many times is Michael T. Williamson gonna play black best friend that gets shot? So because Larkin wanted to spare Cameron's life, instead of agreeing to shoot down the plane over the open desert, he let the plane crash into a highly populated city strip. They don't show any civilian casualties, but the way that plane crashed into everything, bare people died in this scene. So Cyrus and the boys escape in the fire truck. But why was Cyrus on top of the truck, where everyone can see him? Are you dumb? Also, I get that Cameron has been helping Larkin the whole time, but at this point, Cameron is a civilian. Go home. Baby O was being taken to hospital, the police are on the scene, you're not needed. Go home. Instead, he steals a police bike and kills a man with it. That's a crime. This movie should have ended with Cameron going back to prison. Also, remember how Diamond was like, it's a means to an end, acting like he's got some big secret plan of his own? Well, since that clearly didn't work out, my question is, how many times is Ving Rhames gonna play big tough crime boss that gets fucked by a white guy? When Cyrus fell from the conveyor belt, his feet were nearest to the metal smasher thingy. But all of a sudden, if he had the strength to turn his body around, maybe that same strength would have been better used by getting up and leaving. Are you dumb? How long was that helmet spinning for? It was already spinning when they cut to it, but the thing that caused it spinning is not shown. Now I doubt it fell from somewhere, because if it did, it wouldn't be spinning in one spot. So, did somebody spin the helmet, walk away, then the camera cuts to the helmet right when the spinning momentum is dying down? And if so, why? Was somebody trying to figure out if they're in the real world? Anyway, all that death and destruction and all these people care about is grabbing as much money as possible. Actually, that's a pretty accurate prediction of the future. All of a sudden, Larkin and Malloy are friends. Maybe they were hoping for a buddy cop comedy spin-off. To be honest, that might not be such a bad idea. The movie ends with Cameron being reunited with his wife and meeting his daughter for the first time. It's nice. But remember when Cameron said he didn't want his daughter to see him while in prison? And yet, apparently he's okay with Casey seeing him covered in sweat and blood, fresh from 2 confirmed kills, 3 if you include Cyrus, 4 if you include Johnny 23, surrounded by fire, damaged property, injured and dead people, and giving her a dirty toy rabbit that he pulled out of his unwashed armpit. Yeah, this is much better. When the credits roll, they show all the actors smiling and or in good spirits. It's fine, it just seems like the type of thing that'd be better suited to a rom-com or an 80s TV show, but Alright, so before I get into my final thoughts, if you liked this movie, check out these movies. They're all movies involving airplanes. Airplane is actually one of my favorite movies, but if you're a Gen Z born after 2000, probably should avoid it. It's a 40-plus-year-old movie. Everything in there by now is a problem, okay? So let's talk a little bit about Con Air. Now, the first time I saw this movie, I didn't like it. A lot of other people I knew loved it, but me? Nope. And from what I remember, it was mainly because I felt the film didn't make any sense. But now that I'm watching it again all these years later, it still don't make any sense. But what's changed is that I don't mind that so much. Matter of fact, I even like the fact it don't make any sense. You see, when I watched this film for the first time, I was kind of a movie snob. These days I try to be more accepting, not every movie has to be a masterpiece of cinematic perfection, not every movie has to have a deep, multi-layered story, and not every movie has to be some convoluted metaphor for the way we live in a modern society. Sometimes a movie can just be what it is, even if what it is isn't much more than just entertainment for entertainment's sake. Con Air does that. It gives us a relatable hero in an unrelatable situation where for 1 hour and 57 minutes we can live vicariously through Cameron Poe. It's escapism at its finest. Well, maybe not its finest, but still pretty good escapism nonetheless. Now that being said, is Con Air nothing but a popcorn action flick with no real substance? Maybe it just appears that way. At the end of the film, we see Garland Green seemingly being the only one who got out of that whole situation unscathed. The same guy who told us about his definition of insanity. And then we look at Cameron Poe, a former US Ranger who's been in conflicts where he's risked his life for his country, risked never seeing his wife again or his child ever, who's effectively shitted on by that same country. Cameron should have never been sentenced to prison in the first place, certainly not for 7 years for what should have been a clear self-defense case. 7 years later, Cameron is once again risking his life, risking never seeing his wife again or his child ever. But this time his actions are beneficial to the US Marshals, so now it's okay for him to kill people? Perhaps the truth is Cameron was never free, and even at the end he finally gets to see his wife and child, but at what cost? Garland suggested Billy Bedlam is a result of parental issues. So what does the future hold for a girl who didn't know her dad for 7 years and the first time she sees him he's a bloodied and bruised mess? Perhaps Cameron Poe is actually living the insanity that Garland Green described. Perhaps the reason there was never a Con Air 2 is because for Cameron, there is no happily ever after. But that's what I think of Con Air. What do you think of Con Air? Let me know down below, and while you're there, be sure to like, subscribe, and drop a suggestion if you don't mind.